It's a few days before Christmas. The residents of a small Scottish colony are preparing for the holidays. खतरा जो है वो बहुत जल्दी अप्रोच कर रहा है.
The street was on fire, lawns were on fire, and houses were on fire.
I had never seen anything like that.
Christmas is just going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons.
एक बहुत ही भयंकर प्लेन क्रैश जो है, it captures the village and draws the attention of the entire world to it.
A devastating plane crash shatters a village and captures the attention of the world.
It was one of the most significant terrorist attacks in history.
Mystery is finally cracked with a piece of the debris which is even smaller than the fingertip. नमस्कार दोस्तों, मैं हूँ आपका दोस्त, आपका होस्ट भामरी, लेकर के आया एक नया एपिसोड आपके फेवरेट शो दुर्घटनाएं डिजास्टर्स का. ये शो जो आप हर हफ्ते सुनते हैं आपके फेवरेट इंटरनेट रेडियो स्टेशन रेडियो उड़ान पे, जो कि है अ फ्लाइट ऑफ लाइफ. और हर हफ्ते हम चर्चा करते हैं इस शो में किसी नई दुर्घटना, किसी नई डिजास्टर्स की जो कि घटित हुई थी इस धरती पे फ्रॉम टाइम टू टाइम. और आज के शो में हम चर्चा करेंगे 21 दिसंबर 1988 की एक दुर्घटना. October 26, 1988, near Düsseldorf, Germany. For weeks, the German police has been following a group of terrorists near the ancient town of Nord. और आज वो अपना मूव करेंगे. In the trunk of their car, police makes an unusual discovery.
Berühren Sie es nicht.
उन दोनों आदमियों के जो अपार्टमेंट यूज किए थे, उन्होंने पुलिस वहां पे भी रेड मारती है. वहां पे उन्हें खाली पासपोर्ट मिलते हैं, कई बहुत सारे, एंड अ स्मॉल आर्सेनल ऑफ वेपन्स. और जब पुलिस उनकी कार का रेडियो का मुआयना करते हैं तो वो पता लगता है इट इज बीन वायर्ड विद एक्सप्लोसिव्स.
Those devices used a combination of an improvised barometric device and a timer, a short delay timer. All these devices were in fact supposed to go onto an aircraft.
A barometric timer is set off by the changes in the altitude. It is triggered when it reaches a certain height. Since that guarantees that the plane would be in air when the bomb goes off, it's a favorite device for people using and targeting passenger jets. The two men arrested in Germany work for a well-known terrorist organization, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Leader of the PFLP-GC, Ahmed Jibril, made a speech in Libya in 1986, and one of the things he said was that until there's peace in the Middle East, there would be no safety for anyone traveling on an American or an Israeli airliner.
Hafez Dal-Kamuni is shipping weapons to Syria and Lebanon. Marian Krishet is a notorious bomb maker, and he is responsible for bringing down at least one passenger jet. जो बिजी क्रिसमस ट्रैवलिंग सीजन होता है उससे ये कुछ महीने पहले की एक घटना है. German police. The two men arrested in Germany work for a well-known terrorist organization. Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Hafez Dal-Kamouni is shipping weapons to Syria and Lebanon. Marwan Krishat is a notorious bomb maker and is responsible for bringing down at least one passenger jet. जो क्रिसमस के दौरान बिजी ट्रैवलिंग सीजन होता है, उससे ये कुछ महीने पहले की घटना है। और इन दोनों आदमियों को पकड़ने के बाद जर्मन पुलिस ने जो है कमर्शियल एयर ट्रैफिक जो है थोड़ा सेफ बना दिया है। 2 महीने के बाद पैन एम की फ्लाइट 103 जो है लंदन से न्यूयॉर्क जा रही है। जहाज ने हीथ्रो एयरपोर्ट लंदन से अभी उड़ान भरी है। प्लेन में 259 लोग सवार हैं और इनमें से ज्यादातर पैसेंजर जो हैं वो अमेरिकन हैं। चार्ल्स मैकी एक्चुअली वर्क्स फॉर द यूएस गवर्नमेंट। खलील जफा जो है वो डेट्रॉइट में रहते हैं और अपने घर लौट रहे हैं आफ्टर अ ट्रिप टू लेबनान एंड जर्मनी। The first part of the journey takes the plane northwest up over Scotland. The so-called Daventry departure is one of the 6 preset flight paths which the plane takes after flying out from Heathrow. Lockerbie is one of the several towns which the plane will pass over on its way. Tucked away in the Scottish lowlands, the residents of this place are not even aware of that they are living under an aerial highway. Pan Am जो है इस 747 को बोलते हैं क्लिपर मेड फ्रॉम द सीज। और जब प्लेन लेवल ऑफ हो जाता है 31,000 फीट के ऊंचाई पे, तो जो क्रू है वो मेक देयर कॉन्टैक्ट विद द एयर ट्रैफिक कंट्रोलर।
Good evening, Scottish. Clipper 103, we are level at 310.
103, you are identified.
Captain James McCrory is 55 years old. Like many passengers on this pre-holiday flight, he is also heading home. Five miles below, the people of Lockerbie क्रिसमस के लिए तैयारी कर रहे हैं। माइकल गॉर्डन जो है अपने फ्रेंड के साथ चैट कर रहे हैं, जबकि एक बहुत ही अजीब सी ग्रम्बलिंग साउंड fills his house.
There's something odd outside here.
The weather that night was a bit wild. There was a fairly strong westerly wind, and I could hear it hitting the window in front of me. From my window I can see Lockerbie because my house sits up in the hill. And I heard this noise which was above the noise of the wind, and the noise sounded like thunder. And the noise got louder and louder. And I could hear the noise then got to the stage of being similar to a jet fighter. And at that time we had a lot of military aircraft passing through the area. However, I saw dark objects, dark things falling from the sky. Against the lights of Lockerbie, I could see these black objects coming down. And then from my right, quite high in my right, I could see a long, thin, black object which had a fire on the upper surface coming in. And it was making its way towards Lockerbie. When it hit, there was the most horrendous explosion, and I could hear the tiles on the roof of my house lifting.
Hello? Hello?
When the explosion took place, the telephone line stopped functioning.
Lockerbie जो है जल रहा है। Enormous flames reach into the night sky. Michael Gordon races to the neighborhood which is hardest hit.
The street was on fire, the lawns were on fire, and houses were on fire. And it was difficult to go without finding my trousers burning and my shoes burning. You had to jump about quite a bit because everything was on fire. But I remember at that point finding an airline ticket, and it was perfectly intact. There's no damage by fire or fuel or contamination of any sort. And the airline ticket said London Heathrow to JFK.
कोई कारण था कि पैन एम की फ्लाइट 103 आसमान से नीचे गिर गई है and it has smashed into Lockerbie, Scotland. And the daylight, जब दिन निकला तो Lockerbie पे जो था इस तबाही का बिल्कुल obvious निशान दिखाई दे रहे थे. जमीन पे कितने ही घर एकदम गायब हो चुके हैं, vaporized when the plane hit them. An enormous crater has come up at the southern edge of the town. 1500 ton rock and earth have been blasted out from the ground. 11 लोग जो लॉकरबी के थे उनकी मौत हो चुकी है और साथ में मौत हुई है उन 259 लोगों की जो उस फ्लाइट पे सवार थे.
As far as I know, I've lost my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and their house is just a 30-foot crater.
In the ruins of their homes, they search for the bodies of the aircraft's passengers. Such a catastrophe, so sudden, so great a shock for a quiet town.
It looked like a scene out of hell. This whole road was ablaze.
Didn't know what it was, and then we rushed outside and just all this debris coming down.
लॉकरबी में पहुंच रहे हैं एयरक्राफ्ट इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स. इस हादसे के कुछ घंटों के बाद ही वो पहुंच जाते हैं लॉकरबी. Charles is the lead inspector of the British Air Accidents Investigation Branch, the AAIB.
One of the first sites we went to was the site of the crater. That was still smelling very much of aviation fuel for a start, and scattered all around were bits of debris and in some cases human tissue as well.
चार्ल्स जो है जल्दी ही अपनी टीम को इकट्ठा करते हैं and they start looking for clues.
It was all heaving, it was happening, there were loads of people, and it was to some extent chaos.
You'll be organised into groups headed by an AAIB inspector. Does anyone have any questions? The sooner we start, the better.
इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स के साथ ही पहुंचते हैं तकरीबन 1000 से ज्यादा पुलिसमैन और 600 के करीब मिलिट्री पर्सन्स.
You always have this sense of wanting to get to grips with what it is. It was quite clear that whatever it was colossal.
जो भी कोई डेब्री मिलती है, it is put in clear plastic bags and collected later on. जो ह्यूमन रिमेन्स होते हैं उनको स्टोर करने के लिए डार्क बैग्स यूज किए जाते हैं. क्रिसमस से थोड़े दिन पहले की ये बात है and the holiday spirit has just vanished.
At the start of the investigation, what we were doing was finding out which bits of the aeroplane were where, actually finding all the aeroplane.
The sheer scale of the disaster is difficult to comprehend.
Chris, the RAF have offered us a helicopter. Can we use it?
Absolutely.
With so much debris to be found,
the intention was for me to be able to identify geographical landmarks and identify parts of the aircraft.
The investigators needed a bird's eye view of the whole area so that they can find the maximum debris. Investigators जो हैं माइकल गॉर्डन की भी मदद लेते हैं to help them with the collection. They soon get a better sense of their enormous task.
Normally you're seeing a fairly contained accident site. In Lockerbie it was nothing like that because initially the police had identified half a dozen discrete sites.
When we were in the helicopter we could see that the wreckage came out in a cone shape emanating from Lockerbie, and the cone shape got wider and wider the further from Lockerbie.
The principal feature that I was looking for was to try to establish some pattern of the wreckage which showed which would basically help me direct the ground investigators.
They are shocked with what they find. जो डेब्री है वो फैली हुई है उस एरिया में जितना कि लंदन से भी ज्यादा एरिया में ये डेब्री फैली हुई है. तकरीबन 2000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर के ज्यादा एरिया में डेब्री फैली हुई है. और ये बात एकदम क्लियर हो जाती है कि पैन एम की फ्लाइट 103 जमीन पर गिरने से पहले ही टूट गई थी. बोइंग 747 इज मेड अप ऑफ मोर देन 6 मिलियन पार्ट्स. और इस डेब्री के फील्ड में इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को एक ऐसा टुकड़ा या ऐसा कुछ ढूंढना पड़ेगा जो कि बता सके कि आखिरकार क्या हुआ था इस फ्लाइट के साथ.
When looking at the cockpit, I was looking at the roof of it, and the windows were intact. The actual nose part had cracked open, but it was as if it had been chopped off just after the cabin, and you could walk round the back and look into the cabin section from the back.
इस फ्लाइट को जो कॉकपिट था वो एक क्लू दे रहा था कि पैन एम की फ्लाइट 103 जो है हवा में ही टूट गई थी. Severed from rest of the plane, it is 4 kilometers east of the city. Inside the cockpit, the investigators note the position of the switches and controls. They find that the autopilot is on and the oxygen masks are still stored.
This is a fairly standard procedure which we would do in any such investigation. The end result was that there was nothing at all untoward found in the cockpit. Everything was consistent with cruising flight.
जल्दी ही investigators को ये बात भी पता लग जाती है damage to Lockerbie क्यों इतना devastating था.
The main wreckage which fell on the town of Lockerbie was the wing, which is basically both the left and right wing, complete with the structure in the middle.
Investigators को ये भी बात पता लगती है कि प्लेन में तकरीबन 90,000 किलोग्राम ऑफ फ्यूल था.
$150 tons descending essentially vertically at up to about 500 knots speed, and there's an awful lot of energy in that. And that's what created the crater.
Investigators को किसी और जगह देखना पड़ेगा to find out the cause of the crash. जो रैकेज इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को दक्षिण दिशा में मिला था लॉकरबी के, उसको उनको एग्जामिन करना पड़ेगा. These pieces would have come off at the beginning of the disaster. जबकि एक तरफ ये क्लूज इकट्ठे करने का चल रहा था प्रोसीजर, दूसरी तरफ इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स ने जो है इस प्लेन के मेंटेनेंस रिकॉर्ड छानने शुरू किए. Those records rose concerns regarding the plane's age. Clipper made from the seas जो प्लेन था वो बोइंग के द्वारा बनाया गया 15वां 747 प्लेन्स था.
This was one of the older Boeing 747s. It was built in 1970, so it was 18 years old and had got something like 75,000 flying hours.
Perhaps some critical part of the plane would have given way as it flew over Lockerbie.
The two obvious possibilities were that it was a straightforward structural failure, or it was possibly the result of sabotage.
McCharles, Tom Thurman, FBI.
Good to meet you, Tom. I was expecting you.
जबकि इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स प्लेन की जो हिस्ट्री है उसमें छान रहे हैं, कुछ जवाब उनको मिल जाए, तो दूसरी थ्योरी जो है वो सैबोटाज की जो है वो भी it is pursued by the investigators.
We were there to provide technical expertise to the Scottish investigators into explosives and explosive damage, and that the telltale sign that it could be a bomb.
इस हादसे से तकरीबन 3.5 साल पहले बॉम्ब ने जो है एक एयर इंडिया की फ्लाइट को धराशायी कर दिया था जस्ट ऑफ द आयरिश कोस्ट, और उस स्थिति में प्लेन और कितने ही वाइटल फ्लूइड जो थे समुद्र के तल तक पहुंच गए थे, डीप इनटू द सी. दूसरी तरफ इस प्लेन के जो रैकेज था इट वाज लिटर्ड ऑल ओवर द स्कॉटिश लोलैंड, और अगर ये बॉम्ब था तो देयर आर चांसेस कि बहुत ही जो एविडेंस है वो इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को मिल जाए इस केस में.
What kind of logistical effort is it going to take to find everything, and I mean everything, and bring it back to a location to be able to look at it and come to some conclusion? With the fragments that we found on the ground, we were picking those up. We were looking for blast damage on these pieces of metal. But until we found something that said it was a bomb, physical evidence, it was an accident.
We were very mindful of the fact that there was plenty of reports in the media about it being a terrorist act. It's a question of what evidence you find and which direction to take the investigation.
दुर्घटना के 24 घंटे के अंदर 4 डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ने इस हादसे की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ली थी.
The guardians of the Islamic Revolution are undertaking this heroic execution in revenge for the blowing of the Iranian airplane by America.
डिक मार्कीज जो कि एक्सपर्ट हैं ऑन इंटरनेशनल टेररिज्म और वो कार्यरत हैं अमेरिका की FBI में.
A number of organizations either claim credit for or were given credit, including groups from Iran and Palestinian groups, and one Irish group also claimed responsibility for it.
6 महीने पहले अमेरिकन नेवी ने एक ईरानियन पैसेंजर जेट को मार गिराया था और 290 लोगों की मौत हुई थी उस हादसे में. अमेरिकन गवर्नमेंट ने कहा था ये एक सिर्फ एक्सीडेंट है, लेकिन ईरान तो जो है बदला लेने पे आतुर था. Other threats had been made in the weeks before the crash. अमेरिकन कॉन्सुलेट है हेलसिंकी में, वहाँ पे एक अज्ञात फोन कॉल आई थी जिसमें बताया गया था कि पैन एम की फ्लाइट जो फ्रैंकफर्ट से उड़ेगी उसमें जल्दी ही एक बॉम्ब रखा जाएगा. जो इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स से ऑफिशियल जो थे रादर उन्होंने इस थ्रेट को डिस्काउंट किया था, लेकिन फिर भी अमेरिकन एम्बेसी में नोटिस लगा दिए गए थे और कितने ही लोग जो कि 103 में बोर्ड किया था फ्लाइट वो फ्रैंकफर्ट से ही आए थे ऑन अ कनेक्टिंग फ्लाइट.
Excellent work, everyone.
ऑन क्रिसमस ईव यानी कि क्रैश के सिर्फ 3 दिन बाद इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को एक बहुत बड़ा ब्रेक मिलता है.
Everyone clear on what they need to do this evening? Terrific. Tom, can I see you?
Absolutely.
You'd like to put your gloves on, I think, for this.
Mick Charles had a bag and had a piece of metal in the bag.
What is it?
We think it's a piece of luggage rail. It helps guide the cargo containers into place.
Inspectors in the field discovered items which they recognized as being not part of a normal failure sequence that you would expect if it had been a structural failure.
Nick, this has been very near an explosion.
That's what we thought as well.
उस मेटल के ऊपर छोटे छोटे निशान बने हुए हैं. Craters that are a telltale sign for a bomb.
The hot gases of the combustion process of the explosion hits a piece of particularly metal, and it puts pits in it like you would take a blowtorch. Take a blowtorch and you have a piece of metal and you just barely touch the piece of metal, it'll make a little hole down into the metal.
ये पहला पीस ऑफ एविडेंस है फ्रॉम आउटसाइड द टाउन ऑफ लॉकरबी जिसपे कि निशान जो है पता लग रहा है कि आग से वो हुआ है.
What did you find?
I'll take you out in the morning.
जो स्कॉटिश कंट्री साइड है वो बनने वाली है वर्ल्ड्स लार्जेस्ट क्राइम सीन इन द वर्ल्ड. क्रिसमस का दिन है 1988 में, लेकिन लोग जो है अभी भी दुख मना रहे हैं, शोक मना रहे हैं ऑफ दिस ट्रेमेंडस एयर क्रैश.
Christmas is just going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons.
It's just tragic for everybody. I'll never believe in God again.
और इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स के लिए दिसंबर 25 का जो दिन है वो बाकी काम करने वाले दिन की तरह ही लग रहा है.
That was, in my mind, the most distinguishing characteristic of Lockerbie. And although it was over Christmas, you just stay there and you do what you have to do.
Investigators converge on a farmer's field just outside the town.
Over here! Keep yelling! We can't see you! Over here!
The weather had turned horrible. Foggy, kind of misting rain. You couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. And there was debris literally all over the place.
पैसेंजर कंपार्टमेंट रेल का एक और टुकड़ा इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को अभी मिला है.
That looks like the piece that you showed me last night. About 20 inches is just gone.
And lo and behold, that was the other piece of the skid rail that was literally sticking in the ground. We made some photographs. You know, it was a Christmas present that we could go out there to this farm and find the other piece of metal that had been blown off. No, we were not fascinated. We were pumped.
इस टुकड़े में भी पिट्स एंड क्रेटर्स बने हुए हैं, जिसका कि ये मतलब निकलता है कि ये किसी एक्सप्लोजन वाली जगह से करीब था. The pieces of wreckage are part from the southern debris field and nearing the beginning of it. इनकी प्लेसमेंट सजेस्ट करती है कि ये जो है शुरुआती टुकड़े जो प्लेन से अलग हुए होंगे उनमें से हैं ये.
We were very suspicious that it was a bomb which had caused this destruction, but we were not prepared to say anything until we'd had those details confirmed by the forensic experts.
A British forensic lab makes a critical lead. Traces of two chemicals which are used for making plastic explosives is found on the debris near the Lockerbie.
It has been established that two parts of the metal luggage pallet's framework show conclusive evidence of a detonating high explosive.
दिसंबर 28 को, जबकि सिर्फ 7 दिन के बाद क्रैश के इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को अपना फाइनली प्रूफ मिल जाता है और वो सारी दुनिया को इस बात की इत्तला करते हैं. The crash of Pan Am Flight 103 is now officially a crime. With terrorism now the official cry, rumors began to flow. Speculation only now focuses on two passengers. Charles McKee works for the US Department of Defense.
With terrorism now the official cause, rumors start to fly. Speculation eventually focuses on two passengers.
Charles McGee was returning from the Middle East, where he was working, trying to free hostages that had been taken in the Middle East during the mid-1980s.
मैगी जो होस्टेजेस को रिहा कराना चाहते थे वो थे लेबनान के अंदर. 1988 में एक सिविल वॉर उस देश में चल रहा था and it was tearing the country apart. Americans were seen as useful bargaining chips.
There was speculation in the media that Charles McKee may have been targeted by terrorists because of the work he was doing.
McGee is not the only passenger who draws the attention of the media. Khalil Jaffa जो थे सिर्फ 20 साल के थे और वो वापस घर आ रहे थे after a trip to Lebanon and Germany. The story makes it as far as US Congress, लेकिन कोई प्रूफ नहीं मिलता है कि जफा was involved in the bombing और McGee was the intended target. Investigators जो थे from AAIB, Lockerbie में दुनिया भर का जो tons of metal, mangled metal था, वहां से उनमें से कुछ न कुछ छानबीन करके एविडेंस निकालने की कोशिश कर रहे थे.
Before we laid out the wreckage two-dimensionally, we put lines and tapes on the floor to give us a grid, and is this grid related to the geometry of the aeroplane?
It was a 5-acre shed which was long enough that we could plan to lay the fuselage out as opened up like a clamshell, using the bottom center line of the aircraft as our sort of core line.
Investigators are particularly interested in the hull of the aircraft. They remove the pieces of it to a military hangar just outside the town. The fuselage of a plane is bolted to a series of frames, and each frame is then numbered depending on how far it is from the front of the plane. और एक enormous jigsaw puzzle की तरह उन्होंने इस टुकड़ों को assemble करना शुरू किया.
A lot of the structure bears characteristic shapes that you can say immediately, this looks like a door frame. A lot of stuff, it has unique part numbers which can help you identify small and fairly what you would call unidentifiable bits.
As the work continues, more pieces of the aircraft are found which have a telltale sign of a bomb.
Right, the location is 817204.
When they arrange the pieces from the front of the plane, investigators को एक chilling discovery उनके सामने आती है, और यही वो जगह है जहाँ पे कि बॉम्ब ने प्लेन को rip apart करना शुरू किया था.
It became apparent that there was an area of the aircraft in which the damage was really quite different from the rest.
The fuselage in this section is not torn but blasted to pieces.
The fuselage structure in the area of the explosion was blackened and sooted. The fractures were very rapid and jagged, unlike normal tearing fractures of skin.
Frame 700 runs right round here.
Investigators को ये बात तो पता लगी कि एक बॉम्ब था, लेकिन उनको ये भी बात पता लगी कि किस तरह से बॉम्ब ने फ्यूसलाज को रिप्ट अपार्ट किया था, और वो जगह थी just outside of the forward luggage compartment. Peter Clayton was responsible for rearranging the luggage compartment just beyond the shattered zone.
The main goal I had was to identify the baggage container that contained the device. We had maybe 20 baggage containers of a similar construction. So it's like having 20 jigsaw puzzles all mixed up.
जो southern debris field थी उसमें से जो luggage compartment मिले थे, investigators इन चीजों पे ज्यादा ध्यान केंद्रित कर रहे थे अपना. Wreckage that was ejected shortly after the explosion.
We concluded that there were only two on the aircraft, one made of aluminium, one made of fiberglass, and they had been adjacent to each other on the aircraft, and they were the only two that exhibited evidence of an improvised explosive device having detonated.
The metal container AVE4041 पे ज्यादा ध्यान केंद्रित किया जाता है investigators द्वारा. ये जो था, it was directly behind the frame 700 where the blast damage was the worst.
The damage caused to the metal container was quite severe. The damage to the adjacent fiberglass container, I think you might call it collateral damage.
Investigators make a simple framework and attach the pieces of the real cargo compartment to it. और जब वो ऐसा करते हैं तो सब कुछ क्लियर हो जाता है. जो AVE4041 था, उसके अंदर बॉम्ब रखा गया था जिसने कि इस प्लेन को नीचे क्षतिग्रस्त किया था. फ्लोर और साइड का मुआयना करने के बाद इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को ये भी बात पता लग जाती है कि बॉम्ब की हाइट क्या थी and where it was in the container when it exploded.
What that said to me was that the device was probably in a suitcase, and that suitcase was probably not on the floor of the container. It looked like it was one level up.
Luggage records की अगर मानी जाए तो जो बॉम्ब था जिस बैग के अंदर, वो एक कनेक्टिंग फ्लाइट के द्वारा इस फ्लाइट में रखा गया था. जबकि इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स असेंबल कर रहे हैं पीस ऑफ द मेटल कंटेनर, उनको एक ऐसा रैकेज का पीस मिलता है जो कि बिलोंग नहीं करता है वहाँ.
When I was looking at it, I saw a little piece of debris trapped in one of the folds. So gently flexing this apart, it fell out. When I looked at it, I could see it was a fragment of a printed circuit board, an electronic circuit board.
Can you bring me a camera
and an evidence bag, please. Let's get this to the lab.
I didn't know whether it was a bomb part of the airplane really or what. It could have been somebody's shaver, for all I know.
Eventually, जो ब्रिटेन के में forensic experts होते हैं वो पता लगा पाते हैं कि circuit board was a part of the particular brand of radio. और ये खबर जो है Washington तक पहुंच जाती है. It reaches Tom Thurman, who reached his office there.
And lo and behold, an identification was made into a Toshiba SF-16 radio. And ironically enough, the name on the side of that radio, just as a brand name, I guess, was called a bomb beat radio.
The radio cassette player had hidden the bomb. और ये बिल्कुल वैसा ही था जैसे कि जर्मन पुलिस ने उन दो आदमियों को गिरफ्तार करते वक्त पता ढूंढ मिला था उनको 2 महीने पहले. क्या जर्मन पुलिस ने कुछ मिस आउट कर दिया था? Had the bomb made here been used on the Pan Am flight?
When the bombing happened, one of the initial suspects certainly was the PFL-PGC cell in Germany. The intelligence told us that the PFL-PGC was probably responsible for this.
इस प्लेन पे जो सवार हुए थे उनमें से 49 people जो थे, they were from Frankfurt. उन्होंने अपनी जर्नी जो है फ्रैंकफर्ट से शुरू करी थी और लंदन में आके कनेक्टिंग फ्लाइट्स के बाद इस प्लेन को बोर्ड किया था. और उनका लगेज जो था लंदन में रखा गया था इस फ्लाइट पैन एम की फ्लाइट 103 में. लेकिन एयरलाइन ने ये बात इंश्योर नहीं की थी कि जिन पैसेंजर्स के लगेज यहाँ पे चेक इन हुए थे लंदन में, क्या उन्होंने वाकई में फ्लाइट बोर्ड करी थी कि नहीं.
We had to then, if that was the case, prove it.
क्या ये बात ऐसी भी हो सकती है कि a bomb made in Germany was passed through the cracks at Heathrow and the terrorists जो है आराम से freely walk करके चले गए थे. जैसे कि investigators अभी चल ही रही है, there is a puzzling discovery. और वो ये थी कि Lockerbie bombing में जो रेडियो कैसेट प्लेयर यूज किया गया था, it was slightly different from the one seized in Germany, even though both the systems had been made by the same company.
Both were contained in Toshiba radios, but one was a one-speaker model, and the one that blew up the Lockerbie plane was a two-speaker, more updated model radio.
इस बात पे डाउट आ जाता है इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स के मन में कि क्यों दोनों के दोनों रेडियो कैसेट प्लेयर में डिफरेंस था. थोड़ा ऐसा भी हो सकता है जो जर्मनी में टेररिस्ट थे, they are not responsible for this bombing.
You can look at the way that a device is put together and say, hey, I know who put this together because I've seen this before, and this is the way that this bomb builder puts a bomb together. To call it a bomber's signature.
लॉ ऑफिशियल्स जो है उनको और सबूत चाहिए जिससे कि वो एग्जैक्टली बता सके कि किसने आखिरकार बॉम्ब बनाया था. Perhaps the suitcase in which it was packed can provide the clues. Forensic experts जो है ब्रिटेन में वो ये बात का पता लगा देते हैं कि सूटकेस जो था it was hard-sided Samsonite 4000. Samsonite ने बहुत कम ही तकरीबन 1000 पीस ही बनाए थे इस प्रकार के सूटकेस और सभी के सभी बिके थे इन द मिडिल ईस्ट में. कुछ कपड़े भी आइडेंटिफाई किए जाते हैं जो कि एक्सप्लोजन के बहुत ही करीब थे. Likely in the suitcase that concealed the bomb. जितने भी कपड़े थे वो एक सिंगल मैन्युफैक्चरर ने बनाए थे और which sold on the tiny island of Malta.
So Malta became the focus of the investigation because of the manufacture and eventually distribution of some of the clothing that was found at Lockerbie.
Investigators Malta में उस दुकान को भी खोज लेते हैं जिस दुकान पे ये कपड़े बिके थे. And the owner gives them another clue.
The key thing that he told us was the person had a Libyan accent. Something we didn't really have evidence yet that tied Libya to the bombing.
It was just 2 weeks prior to the attack on the Pan Am flight. 1988 में लिबिया जो था बहुत सारी it was reeling under a constant fight with the American military और उस पे इकोनॉमिक सैंक्शंस भी लगाए जा रहे थे। वो देश जो था बिल्कुल ही अलग थलग पड़ गया था और उनका लीडर जो था मोहम्मद गद्दाफी वो बिल्कुल ही एंटी अमेरिकन था। हो सकता है पैन एम की फ्लाइट 103 की बॉम्बिंग was an attack by the Libyans against the US. पैन एम फ्लाइट के बैकेज रिकॉर्ड्स को चेक करते हुए एग्जामिन करते हुए पुलिस ने ये बात पता लगाई कि एक लगेज का पीस जो था वो सुबह के सुबह माल्टा से फ्रैंकफर्ट लाया गया था और वो पीस था बैगेज B8849 जो कि उसके बाद फ्रैंकफर्ट से आगे हीथ्रो की तरफ भेजा गया था। Once there, it was placed on the second level of the AVE 4041. ये सैमसोनाइट केस था जिसके बारे में इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स को पता लग गया था कि इसी में बॉम्ब कैरी किया गया था। इस क्रैश के तकरीबन 1 साल तक के बाद कुछ हुआ था लॉकरबी में जिसने कि बना दिया it simplified the confusing series of clues which the investigators had got from Lockerbie. जो कपड़े माल्टा से आए थे उसमें जो था इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स और फोरेंसिक एक्सपर्ट्स को एक और सर्किट बोर्ड मिला था।
It doesn't come from that circuit board that was in the SF-16 radio. And this circuit board is half the size of your thumbnail.
इस सर्किट बोर्ड की फोटो लेके टॉम के पास भेजा जाता है। उनका ऐसा मानना है कि ये बॉम्ब का टाइमर हो सकता है।
I spent months literally looking through all of the files of the FBI on other examinations that we had conducted over many years.
FBI के पास एक फोटोग्राफ्स हैं उनके पास जो कि different timers which the people have used for to detonate bombs all over the world. लेकिन टॉम थर्मन जो है उनको बिल्कुल भी कोई फोटोग्राफ नहीं मिलती है जिससे कि जो कि उस टाइमर को कॉपी कर सके जो कि उन्हें लॉकरबी से मिला था।
Next.
After a period, I ran out of leads, and at that point, said, okay, now we need to go outside the physical FBI laboratory.
थर्मन जो है फाइनली इस फोटोग्राफ को लेके जाते हैं जो कि सर्किट बोर्ड की थी to the Central Intelligence Agency CIA.
I called a contact of mine and said, I need to bring something over for you to look at.
Sifting through reports of various bombings, Thurman finally makes a match.
Wait a second. That could be the same. Do you have this timer?
थर्मन जो फाइनली जब स्टडी करते हैं जो टाइमर CIA ने कैप्चर किया था, then he is stunned.
Within a few minutes, literally, I started getting cold chills. And right now, as I talk about it, cold chills start on me because I can still see that moment so vividly in my mind that I'm looking at circuit track that's just like what I'm seeing in the photograph.
This is what we're looking for.
जो CIA के पास टाइमर है वो it was seized in Africa a few years ago. 2 लिबियन आदमी जो थे इस टाइमर और कितने ही किलो बारूद लेके एयरपोर्ट सिक्योरिटी से पास करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे और वो टाइमर बिल्कुल आइडेंटिकल है उस टाइमर के जिससे कि फ्लाइट 103 डाउन हुई थी and wouldn't be set off like the biometric timer is seized in Germany. ये जो डिवाइस था it was set off to go off at a particular time and not at a particular altitude.
This is the timer. This is a long delay timer that brought down that aircraft. But now we want to know, okay, where'd this come from?
Lockerbie bombing में जो था different type of timer use किया गया था and it was different from the one seized in Germany and different kind of radio. कोई और लोग ही थे इस जेट के डिस्ट्रक्शन के पीछे।
This was not made in somebody's home laboratory. This was a extremely professionally made timer.
While the criminal investigation is becoming murkier, the accidental investigation is becoming clearer and clearer. Investigation जो है finally स्कॉटलैंड से हटके वामरा इंग्लैंड में पहुंच गई है. Well known for its aeronautical industry, and the town is home to AAIB. इस क्रैश के कुछ महीनों के बाद ही investigators launch a massive endeavor. They begin to rebuild a 20-meter section of the plane from its ruined wreck. उनका ऐसा मानना है कि उनको ऐसा करने से इंफॉर्मेशन मिलेगी जो कि उनको 2D मॉडल से नहीं मिल पा रही थी. उनको ये भी साफ दिख रहा है कि एक्सप्लोजन की वजह से तकरीबन 1.5 मीटर बाय 5 मीटर का एक होल बन गया था प्लेन में. Chris Podro is a senior inspector at aircraft accidents at AAIB.
What was very difficult to understand was the fact that this area of direct damage was effectively a pinprick in relation to the size of the aircraft as a whole, and it was very difficult to understand how this pinprick of damage had resulted in such a comprehensive destruction of the aircraft.
The bomb that brought the plane down has less than 0.5 kilograms of explosives, लेकिन उसकी जो डिस्ट्रक्टिव पावर थी वो बहुत ही इमेंस थी. इन्वेस्टिगेटर्स ये बात और गहराई से जानना चाहते हैं कि किस प्रकार से शॉक वेव जेट के अंदर ट्रेवल करती हैं.
It's rather like a freeze frame on a video footage. If you can capture that point as the thing is coming apart, it tells you a great deal about the way it's coming apart.
और इसके बाद उनके सामने आई वो बात की जो इनिशियल शॉक वेव थी वो इकलौती नहीं थी which damaged the plane. जो सीलिंग था उस पे इतना प्रेशर के साथ फोर्स डाली गई कि जो रिवर्ट्स उसको होल्ड कर रहे थे प्लेन के साथ they just popped out. It was not torn apart but blasted by a shock wave.
The other features that the 3D reconstruction allowed us to identify were areas of remote pressure damage on the crown skin and other areas where explosive shock had been channeled through the internal spaces in the aircraft.
The inside of a plane works like an echo chamber, bouncing the shock waves inside the plane. इनकी ताकत बढ़ती जाती है और जब तक कि वो उनको कोई वीक स्पॉट नहीं मिलता है स्किन में, और जब उनको कोई वीक स्पॉट मिलता है they blast. The work at Bambra is a simple proof कि एक बॉम्ब, छोटा सा बॉम्ब ही हो चाहे कितना डिस्ट्रक्टिव हो सकता है वो एक प्लेन के लिए, and how vital it is to track the bombers down. Almost 2 years after the crash, criminal investigation brings the investigators to Zurich. जिस टाइमर ने बॉम्ब डेटोनेट किया था वो एक कंपनी को बिलोंग करता है जिसका नाम था मीमो. उस कंपनी ने वो टाइमर बनाया था. One of the owners of the company admit to building it.
The timer was given to the Libyan government. Total of 20 of them were made, all delivered to Libyan officials.
Investigators जब शुरू हुई थी तब उनका ध्यान जो था investigators का वो था to the Palestinian terrorist groups in Germany. और अब जो प्रूफ है वो बढ़ता जा रहा है कि उन लोगों का बिल्कुल भी हाथ नहीं था in downing the flight 103.
There were any number of suspects, and it wasn't until we kept putting everything in one pile, and the pile kept stacking up, and it spelled Libya.
जो क्रिमिनल इन्वेस्टिगेटर से उन्होंने लिंक किया है the timer which detonated the bomb to Libya, और उनको ये बात भी पता है कि एक लिबियन ही था जिसने वो कपड़े खरीदे थे जो कि उस सूटकेस में मिले थे, और उनको ये बात भी पता है कि लिबिया हैज अ रीसेंट हिस्ट्री ऑफ मिलिट्री कन्फ्रंटेशंस विद यूएस, और उनको अब सिर्फ एक बॉम्ब की जरूरत है, और 1999 में उनको फाइनली मिल जाता है कुछ. At the time of the accident, Abdul Ahmad Rahi was an intelligence officer for Libyan government. उनको गिरफ्तार कर लिया जाता है और उन पे मुकदमा चलता है.
He was a high-ranking Libyan official. He certainly could have access to whatever he wanted. Our investigation determined that McGrahy also had a front company at Mebo. He had been there many times. He certainly knew each other. When you start to see all the connections and these things just start fitting together, it made it easier to accept our evidence.
और 2001 में जो है स्कॉटिश जज जो है उन पे फैसला सुनाते हैं कि उनको उम्र कैद होती है फॉर द मर्डर ऑफ 270 लोग। 2 साल बाद लीबियन गवर्नमेंट जो है फाइनली एक्सेप्ट करती है कि उनका हाथ था इन बिहाइंड द बॉम्बिंग, और वो पे करते हैं $2.7 बिलियन टू दी फैमिलीज। जो गुस्सा है वो पैन एम की तरफ भी जाता है कि उन्होंने इस बॉम्बिंग में क्या रोल प्ले किया। एक स्कॉटिश इंक्वायरी जो है पॉइंट्स अ फिंगर एट द कंपनी। उस पैसेंजर जिसने की बॉम्ब प्लेन पे चढ़ाया था वो खुद बोर्ड नहीं करता है वो फ्लाइट, और अगर पैन एम प्रॉपर प्रोसीजर्स को फॉलो कर रहा होता उस दिन तो ये गलती पता लग जाती शुरुआत में ही।
One of the things we discovered when we looked into the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 was that there were several bags on that plane that did not correspond to passengers.
जो एयर इंडिया की बॉम्बिंग हुई थी उसके बाद एक बात तो सामने आई थी, वो ये थी कि कोई भी एयरलाइन लगेज बोर्ड नहीं करेगा प्लेन के ऊपर जब तक कि उसके साथ अकम्पनिंग पैसेंजर ना हो तो, और इसको बोला जाता है पैसेंजर बैगेज रिकॉन्सिलिएशन। और बिना किसी नोटिफिकेशन के पैन एम ने रोक दिया था ऑफ मैचिंग द बैगेज विद द पैसेंजर एट हीथ्रो एयरपोर्ट।
So that rule that said that all passengers and luggage have to be matched was not followed.
जो कंपनी थी पैन एम, they were found guilty of both the misconduct. After the crash and the court ruling, Pan Am declared bankruptcy. उस क्रैश के तकरीबन 20 साल बाद भी जो shattered fuselage था उस प्लेन का, it stands at Farnborough, England. और उन pieces का अब शायद यूज करा जाए to train investigators in England and all around the world. A critical aid in case the terrorists strike again.
The enduring feeling I have as a result of Lockerbie is the tremendous level of cooperation we had from all the agencies. And considering that there were about 2,500 people with the military, the police and so on involved in this, I think that's a great tribute.
Lockerbie was a rare occasion that we felt honored to be a part of, to help make this happen. You know, we played small roles, but everybody played small roles to make big contributions to an overall success.
अगर हम लॉकरबी शहर की बात करें तो वहाँ पे अब कोई भी चिन्ह नहीं रह गया है, which reminded people of the horrendous crash which occurred in 1988. जिस जगह प्लेन का कॉकपिट गिरा था उसके पास एक चर्च है। चर्च में जो है a stark reminder is there of all the people who died and bringing the perpetrators to justice. So दोस्तों, इसी के साथ खत्म होता है हमारा आज का एपिसोड। आपके फेवरेट शो दुर्घटनाएं डिजास्टर्स का ये शो जो आप सुन रहे थे आपके फेवरेट इंटरनेट रेडियो स्टेशन रेडियो उड़ान पे, जो की है अ फ्लाइट ऑफ लाइफ। और आज के शो में हमने चर्चा करी थी 21 दिसंबर 1988 की एक दुर्घटना, द ब्रिंगिंग डाउन ऑफ द पैन एम फ्लाइट 103। अगर आप मेरे शो के रिगार्ड्स कोई फीडबैक देना चाहते हैं तो आप मुझे मेल सेंड कर सकते हैं। मेरी मेल आईडी है bhamri.r@gmail.com, यानी कि bhambri.r@gmail.com। आप हमारी वेबसाइट पे जाके, जो कि है www.radioudan.com, वहाँ पे जाके भी फीडबैक फॉर्म भर सकते हैं। आप हमारे फेसबुक पे जाके कमेंट पे, आप जो है फेसबुक पे जाके हमारे पेज को कमेंट लाइक कर सकते हैं या हमारे ग्रुप को ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं। तो दीजिए इजाजत मुझे, यानी कि आपके दोस्त आपके होस्ट भामरी को समझने की। आज का शो मिलूंगा मैं आपसे अगले हफ्ते ठीक इसी दिन ठीक इसी समय और ठीक इसी इंटरनेट रेडियो स्टेशन रेडियो उड़ान पे, और करेंगे हम चर्चा उस आने वाले शो में किसी नई दुर्घटना, किसी नई डिजास्टर्स की। तो नमस्कार, शुभ रात्रि, शबा खैर, गुड नाइट, गॉड ब्लेस।